let's talk about efforts you've done now or you plan to do when it comes to like raising money. And let me say two things, or maybe one thing. I just recently went to. Are you familiar with the Generator, Huntsville
Yes.
Generator?
Yes.
I just went to one of their pitch sessions, and I guess they have the Alpha program, and this was the Beta program. I think Alpha is like it's 4 weeks, and a lot of times they being part of the Generator will kind of go out and seek entrepreneurs, and kind of help them. Hey, how about this idea or that idea? Try to incubate it, right? And then the 8-week program is more, okay, it's more mature. There might be something like Gaming Oasis where it's like, okay, we're now going to use these next 8 weeks to really position Fred and his team to then go after venture dollars or investor dollars for this. And let's just say for a facility, because in the case of NC State, 16 million, it's probably going to be several million to build something.
Yeah.
But that's ultimately what you want, right? Even I actually found the business plan that was a part of your buddy's thesis, right?
Oh yeah,
And
Patrick's
thesis, which was really cool and really informative. Goes to the whole market analysis and everything, but ultimately the theme, that overriding theme, is have Huntsville become the hub, right?
because it's perfect.
We all want that with the music scene, right? Now there's the Orion and there's all these other things where, hey, let's have Huntsville be really known.
Just good at everything.
In the Southeast. But what does that look like right now? What have you done, and what are you doing when it comes to attracting investors? And what's their attitude towards it?
It's a little hard. I think our biggest need is we need someone who's experienced in that. We would love to do something like Generator. We've explored it a few times. We're trying to find the right time to get into it. We want to reach out to them and just kind of figure out what something would be good there. It was actually when I was looking through some of your other podcasts, and I saw that pop up, and it kind of made me remember, oh, we need to look at that. We struggle because esports is it's a big industry, but it's also a little industry. Like everybody who does something with it does it with everybody. And so, pretty much anybody who's associated with some kind of esports, I've had some conversation with here in Huntsville and even in most of the Southeast. And so it's a massive industry filled with a lot of people who do a lot of stuff. And so what we see is the investors for it are very sparse. It's either people who don't understand esports and are just like, someone told me it was a $17 billion industry. I'm going to go throw $1 million at it. Maybe I'll be a billionaire in 2 years. And then it fails miserably. I mean, the first thing in the Southeast before even the SEI was a guy who he just put tons of money in it. Blake actually worked with them slightly, and he just kept putting money in it. And he was like, it'll work eventually. Well, eventually he hit his cap where he was like, yeah, I'm not putting money in this anymore. But it's because he just didn't look at it. He didn't really research it. He just found people that like kind of knew what esports was and were good enough at saying buzzwords that he was like, here's some money to do it. Didn't work out. We got a good list out of that, some cool ideas and stuff to do just from it kind of falling apart and people leaving and eventually us talking with them and them saying, yeah, he wanted to do blank. And so that was really cool. Gave us a lot of good ideas, good contacts, just things overall. But we have struggled pretty hard in finding a sponsor department. Where we've looked at a lot is the city. And, I don't think the city, especially with just building a soccer stadium, is really looking to build another stadium at this point. We're going to keep building them. But luckily, an esports stadium, we think $5 million is the most we'd need. Mostly because we take an already existing space. It doesn't need to be massive and kind of retrofit it. A lot of those school ones are really expensive for a ton of different reasons. They run into a lot of issues. We saw it in UH Esports when they were looking to get something built. They're like, oh, it's going to be 3 or 4 times what the actual cost should be because we can't just buy new land and build new stuff. It's got to be here by the campus where land's expensive. It's got to be in a building that already exists. A lot of stuff like that, and it gets out of hand. And so for us, even reasons I've been reaching out to people like you just to hopefully get the name of Gaming Oasis and SEL out there to more the general public. One, to bring in more people to see what we do, kind of open people's eyes to what esports is because all my time in esports, people are saying, you need to go talk to more people. You're good at just saying stuff about esports and people being like, that makes sense. And so I think I've gotten lucky that, of the nerds, they've kind of my little esport nerd friends, they've been like, you're the spokesperson. Go tell people about esports. And I'm like, all right, cool. I'll do it. I promise. And so really and truly at that point, we're not.
This episode is brought to you by TPG. TPG is the founder of the quality assurance industry and most known for the tagline, "This call may be monitored for quality assurance." which they brought to the call center market more than 26 years ago. They dominate the market with an internationally recognized client base of Fortune 500 brands. They have created the quality standards used by their clients and have defined 307 attributes that they measure to define a great conversation, including complex concepts such as skills associated with empathizing and rapport building with customers. For more information on TPG, visit them at tpginc.com.
Not that far along in that process. I focus on getting the sponsorships, and I mean that's why I mentioned we hired our new guy to run part of our esports division and run the SEL for the most part. He won't do it completely this season, but hopefully in the future he's the guy doing it, and then I can focus my time solely on expanding.
Yeah.
We're finally at that point where it's not begging for people to compete. We're an actual established organization that can run with schools competing. And so once I nail down our sponsorship components and we have basically this season is scaled to the largest I want it to go. And so once we have that, we know our expenses, we know our reoccurring, what we're going to make each year, what we're going to do with that, where it's going to get spent, and how we're going to have to spend it just to stay afloat. And really the turnaround on it's not that expensive. I mean, truthfully, to run our whole league, it's in that 10 to 15K range for everything. And that's with a little bit of profit. And we're hoping to keep doing that with just sponsors alone. And so we want to start looking into local sponsors who might be, esports focused, companies like Boeing or other companies in that realm that aren't looking at it because of esports. It's all job market. This is a ton of students who are most likely STEM. I think it's over. We did a little survey and it was like 82% of our students were some form of STEM and over 60% were computer science.
Yeah.
And they're always looking for software engineers. I mean, who isn't? And so that's what's been big for us.
Are the investors worried that you wouldn't be using the facility enough to maximize and produce that ROI?
I think that was some of the initial worries. So in the Boeing Business Challenge, it was very much set up kind of like you're pitching to a VC. And so a lot of their initial worries were, well, what's filling the stadium all the other time? Truthfully, business-wise, it's almost better to not fill it most of the time for us. Because of the way it's designed and the way it's used, it'd be better to keep hosting more regular events. As we are now, we would not fill it as much as needed, but I guarantee we could find enough to fill it to kind of get that break-even point pretty normal and regular. The biggest issue comes down to how quickly is that ROI. When we turn it into an esports center, which ideally would be what we do on the days off, I think it would come pretty quickly. Our numbers and figures, you might have seen them in that document a little bit. They did have pretty high ROI numbers, and yes, it was good, but at the same time, that right there is not our focus, which is good and bad. Because me as a person, I don't see that as a long-term business. I think people are going to think it's cool for a while, and I think that might fizzle out a bit. And I've been kind of proven right in the recent years because we've seen other companies in the Southeast that did that exact thing not make it. There was a company called Eplex. They were actually going to come to Huntsville for a bit. It didn't work out. They had another location that sadly they had to shut down. I love the guys over there. They do great stuff. But now they're just kind of stuck in Birmingham, and they do good stuff, and they found a good niche market of, kind of like that birthday party market, the, kind of maybe get a group of guys together and go over market. But we want to focus more on the competition side of things. And I think that's where the money is.
Like a Top Golf of esports type thing, like bowling out. It's like you're going bowling or something where it's just that birthday party, escape room.
Exactly.
Let's go do this once a year.
I was like, I don't know if you've seen Divergence yet.
I have.
So that's a really good example of what we kind of had in mind back before COVID. I love what they did. I love talking to him over there. All of them that are involved, they did a great job with it.
Explain what Divergence is. I know it's right next to my newfound place, Bandito Burrito.
Yeah, great place.
I love that place.
So Divergence. So when we originally had our esports center plan, the big thing was we wanted to be in Stovehouse or kind of in that area, and the driving factor of bringing people in would be the VR stuff. Because sure, people even out there, like you said, people have gaming computers. I mean, everybody has them now. Anybody can build them. It's $1,000 to get a really good one.
Yeah.
Why would I go pay $20 an hour to go play it in a store? Well, I would maybe the first one or two times. Then I go, I'm going to build this at home. The VR, on the other hand, there's this thing called the Omni Arena, or the Virtuix Omni Arena, which actually Divergence has. And it's this big kind of cube setup where there's 4 treadmills, omnidirectional treadmills inside of it. And you put VR on, you can run in place, you can jump, kind of crouch, shoot, dodge, whatever in this treadmill space. And it's super cool. And that would have been the big driving factor there, and it's something that we would love to do in the space, like on those normal days when it's an esports center. But we think that hosting larger events would be the best move. And truthfully, in my opinion, I describe the space as it's really just a glorified production facility. Huntsville is always looking for more event space. We talked to the city planner a long time ago. He was like, yeah, I mean, if that space could be used for just events, that'd be a whole different story. And I go, yeah, it can. Any event that y'all need a production space for, it can be used for. You could run a concert out of there. It may not be the biggest space for one, but it would work. Yeah. You could do karaoke bar. You could do a news broadcast. That space is designed to be multi-use because no esports event would be the same because it's multiple different sports. And that's where I start kind of looping everything back together of it's multiple sports, it's multiple events. It's a space that ebbs and flows every day that you use it. It'll never be the same thing as yesterday. And so my vision was always everything's on rollers. You can move it in and out. You can do whatever you want with it. And so that's how we would kind of solve the ROI without doing an esports center. And sure, the days that we have nothing, let's roll the computers out. People can come in with their buddies and play. Yeah. I think me and my buddies would probably pay $20 for an hour of all of us going in person and just get to sit next to each other, play a competitive game, and get that kind of that fun spirit. It'd be no different than if you went and paid $20 an hour to rent a baseball field, play with your buddies there. Sure, you could do it in your backyard, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
But I do think that comes with some growth in people's mind of gaming is not just something that people do because they're lazy, but it's something that people just have fun with.
Yeah.
It's something that I was very grateful growing up. My parents were like, you like gaming. I mean, playing Minecraft inspired me to become an engineer. And so they were very like, this is good for him. Like, you're going to enjoy this. I learned to type playing Minecraft just to tell people, hey, man, I'm building this. But
so is there any, when you go to these investors and we're talking about a facility, and are they, because my mind is racing. I'm thinking about like just an arena. And the many things you can do in an arena.
Exactly.
You can do basketball, you can do hockey. And in fact, usually the floor is there's always ice like all the time. And they just play, you can do graduations, you can do bull riding, you can do monster trucks, depending on how big it is. You can do, Disney on Ice. I mean, like it's an arena. Toyota Field a little different because, there's grass and it's there for baseball. And yeah, you can do football. They played a football game, but ultimately you don't want to like do too many things where you're damaging the surface. Now Joe Davis Stadium is supposed to be multi-use, right? The high schools are going to use it. No, that all makes sense. Like I'm thinking, man, you could do esports, you can do pickleball, which is like taking over the world now.
Yeah.
There's all these things you could do, but do the investors get like, hey man, slow down. Are you the esports guy or are you the venue guy? And are you spreading yourself too thin? Is that the feedback you're getting?
I wouldn't say it's a spreading too thin kind of thing. I think, truthfully, we haven't talked to a ton of investors. A lot of them would be people I know, and so they kind of know me as the guy who's always too thin. They're like, man, this guy he's just doing stuff to do stuff at this point. My mom says the same thing. She's like, can you be a kid for like a little bit? And I'm like, well, now I've graduated, so you can't say that anymore.
Right.
But that's one reason I always use the basketball court size analogy. Because if I tell them basketball court, they imagine what you just imagined, where it's basketball court. Oh, it might have an ice rink underneath it. Oh, it could do this, it could do that. And it kind of gets their mind flowing a little bit that it's not this new thing. It's just, let's put something else on top of the basketball court. At an Auburn basketball game, they played esports in the middle of halftime. They played a Rocket League game on the court. It was super cool. And the students loved it. And I love that video because these guys just run out with computers, set them up, and they go. And the crowd's like, yeah, kick the ball in, get the ball in. And I guarantee half those people, like some of the girlfriends that just tagged along to the game were like, what is going on here? And some of the girls that love Rocket League are like, yeah, let's go. And some of the guys are like,
what is this?
But they're all still into it because it's an Auburn team kicking some other team's butt, and they just get behind it because of that. And that's why I love collegiate, is we can capitalize on that. And so when speaking with investors, it's a lot of, well, you like the SEC, right? That's what's nice about Alabama. It's SEC football, right?
Right.
Esports. And they're like, what? And I'm like, SEC football, though. And then kind of keep playing that game for a bit, and they get excited about it. And so really it's been a matter of finding the right person who can get esports and doesn't get all caught up on the side stuff, because the issue we run into a lot is the few investors we spoke with, they find some just odd part about the whole thing that they become obsessed with. One person, it was simulators. And it was like, well, this could be like flight schools. And I was like, well, that yes, it could, but we don't want to focus on that. We want to focus on the esports competition aspect. Or another one, it was, what was it? It was they really like the Esports Center concept, but they wanted it for like teleworking. People could come in and work there. And I was like, well, yes, they could, but we don't want to focus on that. And so really our issue so far has been the people with the money, getting them to grasp how it would be used and what it would be used to do. And that is to make an esports facility. And no matter what, with the amount of esports there is in the background here in the Southeast, I get comments all the time of people, hey, do y'all have a facility? Do y'all have this? Do y'all have that? We want to rent it out to do something. I go, well, we don't have one yet. They're like, oh, we saw y'all's renders and we hoped it was done now. And I'm like, no, it's not going to be done for a bit, even if we got the money. But it's definitely one of those things where I wish people would be able to have a little more faith of once it exists, it'll be used. I guarantee people when we're going to get a soccer stadium, people are like, I don't think people like soccer here. I know a ton of people that do, you know, and I heard that from some people. They're like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. You know, like, why are we getting soccer and they're calling it football club? And I was like, well, you know, people like that.
Yeah, there's a market.
Exactly. And next thing we know, Joey Cece, you had on a while back, his post where it was, you say there's nothing to do in Huntsville. It's my favorite post I've seen in a long time. And it's the Trash Panda Stadium, the Orion, and the football stadium.
Did you listen to my episode with him?
I did. I watched. I listened to it at work. I think the day it was posted because he had reposted it.
Yeah.
And I'd listened to you in the past, but I never like had remembered what the name of the podcast was.
Oh, okay.
And so when I saw that, I was like, that's the guy. And so I rewatched a couple of them. And because I loved the format you did where it was just, let's talk about cool stuff.
Yeah.
Like support local. Let's do this. And I loved it. And so that kind of stuff is what I mean. If we did esports, it would thrive.
Yeah, I don't think people realize. Telework. Yeah, look, these are gaming machines.
Yeah, like
and
sure,
there's
they
a
could
certain
use it.
software build, and and things like that. And same thing like with this. You came in. This is a pretty impressive studio, right? Well, would people want to rent it out? I've had the same type of thing. I'd like to be in a brick and mortar space and just have like a podcast. Come in here. Actually, I don't know if you noticed, those are museum. You see how those things hang?
Yeah.
Like the pictures? Well, they're meant to, and I crop them out on the thing, but they're meant to just be easy. I can just replace them. They're just like museum
cool.
thing. So I would think, well, would a podcast want to come in here if you wanted a new backdrop?
Throw their logo
you
up.
You throw whatever you want. I mean, everything's somewhat interchangeable.
Yeah.
Because these are, they're not the most expensive cameras, but they're, there's 3 pretty expensive cameers. These are expensive mics, very expensive computer running this whole thing. We got some lights.
Work to set it up.
Yeah, it takes some work to set it up. And, there's some monitors for good. If you're doing something live, this is perfect for the live format, right?
Yeah.
And so the question is there a market for that?
And there is.
And because, most people are like, well, I can, every day you see some ad like, oh, just start a podcast. It's really super easy. Okay, it is. If you want to do it from a desktop thing but if you want an in-person experience, maybe it's worth paying $50 an hour, to do something. I go through the same thing where you try to get people like, look, there's a professional side to this or a purpose and an intention side to it as well. It's not just, do you want the random Boeing person to come work remote?
Yeah, and we saw that a lot. So one of the other ways, because I'm pro Esports Center idea for them some days, but I'd rather the space exist on those days just to be used. And a big part of it is on the back of our render that we did, there were 3 rooms. One was the analyst booth. That room would be perfect for a podcast. Or let's say someone's kid wants to start Twitch streaming. And they want to set up to do it. Rent that out for, a couple $100 for the day. They come in there for 8 hours and do their Twitch stream. Maybe, Mark Rober or someone comes to Huntsville or Smarter Every Day or anybody of that nature is like, I want to have a really, really nice room that's designed for this to use. They can come in and set up and one of our guys will be there to be their producer. And that's that simple. And those would cover those small days. And like I said, it's just a production facility.
Oh, I think this is the render here.
It should be at the bottom of the article. Yeah.
Is that it?
Just like that.
All right, let me pull that up. And so this is what you're talking about.
Yeah. So that little blue area is the actual stage with the seating. Behind it is those office spaces. So you'll see we actually have the kind of like office space for where, I might be during the day on the bottom left. Then we have a conference room that could be used for team meetings. We have the analyst booth and the production studio. And so those rooms are interchangeable. And with a slightly bigger space, you could throw a couple more of those rooms on because they're pretty small. But that little bitty room in the top right could run all of them. You could have 4 guys in there with 4 different streams going on. And the entire rest of the facility be empty. And that would be plenty.
Yeah.
And that's what's nice about these facilities is it's an upfront cost, but the actual cost of running them is almost non-existent. You have your normal expenses of owning a building, but for the events, they really make up for it. I mean, we see it in Dallas. I mean, they have Arlington. They have the Arlington Esports Arena, and it's insane. It is the esports arena for
Arlington,
people to look
Texas?
at. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, that is the flagship. The city really went in on that. Like, they put an insane amount of money in it, and I would never expect us to have something like that because, truthfully, it's a bit excessive. We don't need that, but it is like, if you're going to build an esports arena, you look at that one and you say, that's what I'm modeling this on.
You know, there's a market for everything. And I was telling you about my son's archery earlier, right?
Yeah.
And if you go down to, I guess it's kind of near Gunnersville, there's this, it's like a warehouse. And what they've done is they have basketball courts in there.
Okay.
I mean, I'm assuming they might even do something like they might have like roller skating.
That's pretty cool.
And but then they run the archery there, right? And Alabama does a really good job. I would say nationwide, if you have archery, they do a really good job. They figured this out where, like, over 3 days, they'll have like 2,000
oh my gosh.
athletes, participants come through.
Wow.
So everyone has a flight time. So, and let's say it's like, the fourth graders show up, and the fourth graders are on Thursday, and they're going to shoot from 10 to 2, and they get like 50 minutes. Everyone's going to shoot at 3 targets. From 10-meter targets, and then there's like 15-meter targets. Okay. And then they switch, and it's very structured. And by buses are coming and going, kids are coming and going. Parents, and my son might do like Saturday at 2. Well, then he qualifies and goes to nationals.
Yeah.
In Louisville, and then he qualified for Worlds in Myrtle Beach. And it just continues, right? Where you just go to and then you go to those places, and they're the huge convention centers.
Like, this is sick.
And there's thousands and thousands of people coming through, right? And the vendors are there that are either selling apparel, or they're selling gear, or equipment for archery, right? And it turns into a convention. And I'm like, of course there's something for esports. And if you build a facility, they will come. And if you run it down to the elementary school level, they will come. The intermediate school, oh my gosh, right? I just have this vision with you. I'm excited where I could just see it.
Yeah. The SEL is, I didn't want to get too much into it because it's a whole thing at the end, I figure. The SEL, we're currently collegiate, right? Our game plan next is high school. I mean, Bob Jones went to they won the state championship.
Did they?
Actually at Eplex, which was an esports
Birmingham?
facility in Birmingham. We know it's crazy. Bob Jones is right next to Huntsville. So if we had a Huntsville esports arena, it'd be right there. Our whole goal is, with an esports arena, with the SEL, one, it's a recruitment pipeline for the colleges to hopefully eventually legitimatize it, set up scholarships, set up a recruitment pipeline for the clubs to find members, for the teams and the sports teams when they get varsity to then recruit from high schools, the same way you would baseball, football, volleyball, whatever, and make that pipeline. And the nice thing about this facility here in Huntsville is UH could practice at it, Calhoun can practice at it, Alabama A&M can practice at it, all of the high schools can practice at it. There you go. There's your ROI.
Yeah.
Now the schools are using it as a facility. And it's a lot cheaper for them to rent that, 1 day a week than it is build out the same thing for $5 million at their school.
Yeah.
And now they get a state-of-the-art facility where they could even come and practice with the colleges. There you go. More recruitment. The colleges can come in on the day that, Bob Jones is practicing. Everybody wants the Bob Jones kids because they killed it. I mean, they came to our SEL because they wanted to come to ChargerCon, and they beat some of the college teams.
Really?
The kids were out there just they beat people that got to our top 3, and I was like, what is going on? And I asked, it's the same guy with the hand where I said, did y'all go easy on him? And he goes, yeah. And I was like, I don't know, y'all looked like you were kind of struggling a little bit there to beat them. And he's like, no, they're in high school. And I'm like, okay, sure. But no, he's a great guy. They're all so good. I mean, I just can't imagine what it takes to get to that level. And like, the parents were there and they were proud, and like, that's what made me so happy that day was some of the colleges' parents came out. And when we start seeing that more with esports, that's when these facilities can become something big. Thursday afternoon, you go see, like what you were saying, you go on that day and you see your kid do some archery. Parents can come out and see the kids do esports. And they can see that what they do at home is now translating to something that when the college recruiter comes out, it's the same as baseball when the dads are like, yeah, that's my son out there.
That's my
same
son.
Thing.
Yeah.
Same with archery. My son just hit that right there. Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
Esports. My son just hit that aerial right into the goal. All the same. And once we have that mentality and once we have those resources, like you said, I mean, Worlds is the limit. I mean, those kids will go from the Huntsville Esports Arena, and we don't want to be, the world's best esports arena. We want to be the Southeast's esports arena.
Right.
It's that simple. We just want to be the place for esports in the Southeast, and Huntsville's already the place for so much in the Southeast. I mean, we got a rocket on the highway. I mean, what more do you want from us?
Right.
Esports arena is what I want, but I mean, that's what I tell people. It's like the sky is space is quite literally. We've already been there. We might as well do whatever we can to make us the next big place for something else in the Southeast and have those schools come and compete here.
Let me pull up. I think I'm going to pull up a segment from your business plan.
Go for it.
And I think I read in there somewhere, it's not in what I'm going to show you, that to put things in perspective, there were like 30 million people who watched the NBA Finals, but there were 45 million people who watched a esports competition. So 15 million more, right? So that just kind of, sometimes when you see those things, it's like, wow, it's
shocking.
That's interesting, right?
Yeah, and what's crazy is I actually think those are numbers from maybe 2021.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay.
So even now there's more events that are similar to like that scale of beating out, we haven't updated that section in a bit. Oh,
this goes to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. It may not have been that one NBA player that you had in mind, but it just shows you, okay, Jordan himself, he's got a lot of money, but hey, of that in his portfolio, he's going to invest some money into Team Liquid.
Exactly.
Right. And Drake is into it. Steph Curry, who's actually now, I think is going to end up being on the Champions Tour for golf. He just won
I've seen that.
He just won that tournament out in Lake Tahoe.
That's pretty crazy.
Steve Young, Andre Iguodala, right, and Sean Diddy Combs. So it's there. Like, there's some star power, and I guess that folds into you figuring out how to really pitch this to people to say, hey, there's some big money behind this. It's coming. What else do I need to tell you?
And that's the thing. We pull out names like that's the thing is when we put Michael Jordan in there, like, it's Michael Jordan. People will be like, oh, okay, Michael Jordan. People are still like, well, that's kind of weird. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, that's the whole point. It's like kind of a shock factor thing. And they're like, so he really did that? And I'm like, no, we just put that in there. But yeah, he did. And I mean, like, for example, Team Liquid and TSM Team Solo Mid are two of the biggest. I own merch from Team Liquid. Like, that's crazy. When we did this research, I was wearing, if you know what the anime Naruto is, they did a crossover with one of the most popular anime of all time, and it was a combined merch line. I was wearing a little sweatshirt that I owned from that. And I was like, what in the world is going on here? I didn't even know Michael Jordan was involved with that.
Yeah.
And so when we see stuff like this in the industry, to us it's a no-brainer. It's like, I see that as an investor. Like, then it's already a no-brainer. Now it's just even more of a no-brainer because everybody else that you admire and look after to see what are they doing, they're doing it already. And I mean, you see the Orion and stuff like that, and now Huntsville's a no-brainer. I mean, it blows my mind just every day, like, how many firsts there are in esports, and then I see another first here in Huntsville, and I go, why don't we put those two together? And that's what, maybe I struggle with, or maybe we haven't been able to convey as well as to investors is this should be that no-brainer decision. I mean, of course there's money involved. It's never going to be no-brainer, but hopefully one day someone's just like, hey, take it. Here you go. Have fun. And I'm like, yes.
So I guess the first past guest of mine I would refer you to is Donna Ehart, just from The Generator. Just, hey, you might as well, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like you've looked into it before, but maybe just do a fresh, get into one of the programs that they have. Huntsville has, I guess, tons of free resources when it comes to that. I think there's also Mark II, which is an even bigger venture capital firm in the area. I think
I heard about that. I don't remember if that was the name of it, but I heard about something.
But let's talk a little bit now, like I know you're not a player necessarily, a hardcore player, but a couple things from the player standpoint. And one past guest I just had was Roger Kitchen, who does power mental performance. Okay. And it starts like he's done, he works with like swim and dive teams. He's a power lifter. He's like 50-something years old, but he's a 10th ranked power lifter in the U.S. Wow. And some of it gets into like people who compete. And I'm assuming because we're humans, like some people don't do well on standardized tests. No. And he's actually worked with students on standardized tests and how to mentally perform and kind of listing out these controllables and uncontrollables, right? And walking things back. Like if you're a baseball player, like what are all the things that you need to do before you step into the batter's box, right? And kind of just playing next play speed, right? Something happens and it's not good. No, go on to the next play. do you feel like in what you do know with players that there are those who get benefit from a mental coach as well? You talked about coaching,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of those coaches are this. They're talking about strategy. Okay, what went well in that game we just played? What could we have done better? Those types of things. But is there a need for kind of that mental toughness focus amongst those who play esports?
I'd say so. I mean, once again, my whole goal with this is to make it seem like any other sport,
Yeah.
and it will be eventually. And so, when those people come and talk to, we always see the things of, so and so came and talked to a football team. It's an inspiring story, or it's, they used to be a football player here, so I got where I was. Peyton Manning saying, well, I wasn't that good when I started, but now I'm Peyton Manning, or whoever. No matter what sport it is, there's always those people, and I think esports would benefit from something like that for sure. I mean, we've seen it some of the bigger schools. They already bring in people who do some of the more, talks about how to, whether it's pregame rituals or if it's, just general taking care of yourself. They, from what I can tell, the schools that have those resources are the ones that we see get to the grand finals, the ones that we see make it far. Sure, there's the outliers every once in a while, but it's very obvious when they have everything from the mental health to the physical health that they are better. I mean, it's a more cohesive package. It's a more cohesive player, and it's a player who is more ready and has the toolbox to get what they need to win.
Got it.
And so, to me, it's really no different than any other sport. Back when I used to play baseball or run cross country, I mean, cross country especially, it was definitely a mental type of deal. You're just running. I mean, if you don't want to run, you're gonna stop, and then that's the it.
Right.
And that's the end of it. And so, I think it's very similar to that in esports too. I mean, it's the same thing of, once you realize, your hands are cold, warm them up. If you realize you're not enjoying the game anymore, figure out what you got to do to get back in that mental state. Or, I mean, if it's mentally better, if you switch games or something. And that's actually a huge issue in esports on the mental side of things. I'm glad you brought that up. I hadn't even thought about bringing that up. There's a lot of times when the players, they play that game for fun. A lot of people don't go play on a baseball field and they come home and play on their baseball field in their backyard.
Yeah.
These players go to the school, play on the gaming computer at school, then they come home and they play the exact same game with most likely the same group of people at home. And I've heard sometimes it's hard to either get out of that competitive team mindset where, like, you get home and you're still yelling at the guy because he missed the ball, but y'all are just relaxing. You're supposed to be having fun.
Right.
And they get to a point where there's a mental block, and they need that kind of mental coaching to be like, hey, like, we need to get this sorted out, or we're going to bring in a sub, or you're going to need to go, take a semester off or do something. And I think when scholarships and other stuff like that starts coming in, that'll be a whole different thing, because right now it's not that there's no incentive. I mean, they want to win, but if things aren't going your way, let's just forfeit the match and not play tonight. Right. That's happened to us countless times. We'll have a team DM me, morning of, and they're like, hey, so-and-so's just not on his game today. We're just going to forfeit because we're going to lose anyways. But when you have a scholarship and a ton of other stuff, one, there's more pressure on you, and that's where you need that kind of coaching. But two, now you're going to play because it's like, we can win. We're going to win. We've trained for this. We need to do this. We have scholarships. There's money on the line. There's possibly a professional future on the line once that pipeline's even more developed. I mean, my friend Jacob, he's our esports guy. He's the guy who tells me, hey, Fred, you're doing something crazy. No one's going to like that, because he has been the player. And he's talked a lot about stuff like this. He was a Call of Duty player for UAH.
Oh, wow.
And he was amazing. That dude was way too good at that game, I'm going to be honest. But he talks about it all the time, and there's a lot of things where sometimes it hits the players hard when the developers of the game change the game. Call of Duty releases a new version every year, and to be honest, they have not been that good the last 2 or 3 years, apparently. I don't know much. I don't play COD, but there's been a lot of complaints from that corner of the room when the game comes out. Yeah. And apparently that really hits them hard because, football doesn't just release a new rule book every year. And so for them, it's hard to kind of accept that when the game they love and they love competing in takes a 180, and they're like,
sure,
this isn't even fun anymore. And so I think for sure the mental coaching aspect of it, alongside like the actual physical health aspect of it. I mean, mental health, in my opinion, it coincides directly with it. One is not exclusive of the other. You have to have both. Yeah. That's a huge thing I'm a proponent of. I love fitness and I love that kind of stuff. And I'm like, you cannot be in a bad mental state and get a good workout.
Sure.
Like, they coincide. And so I think it's the same deal there. I mean, if you're not enjoying the game, you're not having a good time, you're not going to be good.
Now, let's assume you're having a big event, the biggest one you've ever held, or even for the real big events. I would. This is similar to why I'm not really a gambler, and if I were, and I don't, because I just know that I would have that disease where I would like start borrowing against my credit cards because
Yeah.
like I would just get
I'll get it back.
I get the bug. But like I've just never it's never set well with me anything where you're kind of subject to like an algorithm that you didn't write, whether it's video poker or just online gambling. Like that is a software program that was written by somebody that has some algorithm in it, right? Versus just sitting and playing hard cards.
Yeah, you wouldn't be playing it if the algorithm wasn't against you.
So my question is, how is this even an issue kind of from a cybersecurity standpoint or just a tampering, where is there some sort of third party that has to come in and validate that whatever game you're playing and the build you're playing, there's been no funny business. There's been no tampering because you got these, if you're hosting it, there could be that, well, what have they done? What have they done to this? And they're winning too much. What's going on here? Why does UAH keep winning? Is that a reality? I mean, I know these aren't games that are necessarily developed by any of these schools, right? You're just using the games that everybody plays, Call of Duty and such, but they can be tampered with, can they not?
I'd say it's not an issue we've run into a ton. We have had like, the tech issue kind of stuff, or I think a big one I'd explain is there's a thing called host advantage. So, of course, if the game match is being hosted on your computer, you're going to have the best ping, meaning, your inputs are slightly faster. And for some of our teams like Florida State, when they're playing Oklahoma, that's a pretty big distance. And granted, technology's come far enough that in the internet's eyes, that's not that far of a distance, but it's still just enough that you could make an argument that that's a problem. And I'll get back to that in 2 seconds. But the tampering side of things, there's really just no chance of that, solely because the games we play are designed with, I wouldn't say designed with esports in mind, but it's a big component of them. And they have enough anti-cheat and enough systems where if they were to tamper with the game, they wouldn't be able to connect.
Okay.
For the most part. If we have complaints, we do verify things, and players have to pass the anti-cheat test. They can't have anti-cheat disabled. I mean, there are basic requirements, but we haven't seen an issue with that. In the future, when things kind of take off, I know actually at a CSGO game, someone managed to put cheats in their, the little USB dongle that goes in your computer, the Bluetooth receiver. They managed to put, some kind of onboard memory in it and put cheats into the computer at a large CSGO event. It was caught so quick. I mean, it's so obvious because most of the time it appears on your screen, and they have people that walk around and check it. Now, when we're online, it's hard to see that. Luckily, anti-cheat, especially with AI and stuff, has gone a long way, and nowadays it's pretty hard to do that kind of stuff and it not be just obvious. And when we're literally sitting there watching it and live streaming it, we'll see it immediately.
Got it.
And truthfully, a lot of the teams are passionate enough about esports, we haven't even run into an issue of people trying. Now, the ping stuff is a whole nother ball game because you're never going to be able to avoid that unless you're in that LAN setting. And so what we do is we focus on, there's actually a rule book for it. I can't remember our exact rules, but basically it rotates who hosts. So, the team who is the higher seed, or basically the home team, same thing as home field advantage. Basically, you get it for the first game. Well, you win, the other team gets it for the next game, vice versa, back and forth.
Okay.
And so, yes, technically one team gets that kind of advantage, but it's, in my opinion, and the way we all look at it in the industry, is it's very similar to home field advantage.
Okay.
But for those grand finals where it matters, that's why having a LAN event is so important. One, it's hype. It's fun. Everybody's there in person. But logistically speaking, there is no room for someone to have an advantage. I mean, when you're playing on LAN, what you do is what you get. There is no, and if there's a tech issue, everybody gets it.
Got it.
So there's no, Gary from this school has lower ping than me. It's, well, you're all on the same internet, so I don't know what to tell you.
Let me, I'm going to tell you a quick story from my live streaming days. I used to, I don't know, have you ever heard of Ustream? You may not have. I don't know who they got bought by, but like in the early days of live streaming, and this is before there was any sort of cloud-based infrastructure, right? Like you're tying into, in this case, Ustream servers, and I downloaded to my desktop basically something like OBS, and actually it's called Wirecast.
Okay, I've heard of Wirecast.
And then Wirecast licensed, like Ustream would just come along, and all these other platforms would come along and use their software and then license it I had a licensing agreement. I had no idea it was basically Wirecast, but it was Ustream customizing it on top of that, right? Well, because I am older and most everything originally used to just be desktop apps, right? And then phones come along later. I didn't really realize that when I logged into something, it was actually making like a port 80 call out or a 443 call out to some, online server, right? So you're kind of getting like this hybrid thing. Well, so I start doing this like live streaming, and sometimes I would do it from an air card if I was doing a football game outside, but if I was in the school, I would love to just tap into their network, and I just plug in an Ethernet cable. I didn't really think about it at the time, but I got lucky in the first year where there were no firewall restrictions, no port restrictions, and I just did these games. And of course, at some point I'm streaming out to the internet. I know that, but I never thought about like before I stream, and that's where I thought I was just like going out to the internet for the first time. Well, so I do a bunch of things. Well, then I go on the road for the playoffs. We go to a different county, and I can't even log into I can't do anything.
Wow.
Because they actually had things in place. And that's when I realized, like, some of it's just like I'm trying to like build this concept, and yes, I'm IT minded, but I just wasn't thinking. I was more worried about trying to call a basketball game and having content for the game and building my graphics and building my storyline versus actually like the technical side. I just assumed, hey, it works up here, it's going to work everywhere. And I go down there and I crash and burn, can't do the game. And then that led me, then the next year, the county that I had been doing games in, they started putting firewall restrictions in.
Nice.
So then I had to go to the engineers and say, can you please open up a window of time where you allow me to go out? And then I had to learn all about other ports that things were communicating on. Well, I mentioned that because I was reading something where, let's say you're doing some international stuff or you're playing a game that requires a ping or out to like a server in Singapore, but based on where you are, it may not allow that.
Yeah.
Have you run into those kinds of things where you're like, I had no idea there's this protocol restriction, or you know what I mean? We had no idea that this game does this, and there's the cyber problem.
Yeah. I will say I got lucky. Growing up, I made a lot of Minecraft servers, and so I learned a lot about how the ports work and things like that. So I was always abundantly cautious. Luckily, there's not a lot of scenarios where that won't happen. Usually when you install the games, they kind of alter your stuff enough that you're not going to run into the issues because it's a commercial product that's mass sold. Their goal is to avoid that because
Sure,
normal people are going to be like, my game won't work, help. And they're going to be
right.
like, I don't know. But the only time we really ran into those issues was at UAH, where they had an actual IT team that has security up because they don't just want people popping holes through the port and calling it a day,
Yeah.
I remember freshman year we tried to make a Minecraft server in the dorms, and then we were like, oh, yeah, we probably can't do that. Of course, yeah, we couldn't. Luckily, IT people there, they are now far along where it's like, we expect this. We've opened up X number of things.
Right.
Just go here. We did that. It was fine. So now we haven't really run into the issues, but at the same time, we haven't ever tried much internationally.
Yeah.
I will say, though, I can't imagine it working well for gaming because the games usually have 4 or 5 key servers. There's the U.S. Central, East, and West, and those all communicate pretty well. But when you're trying to play against some people in, the Korean servers, you can't even play with them unless you set up kind of somewhat custom of a game. And, I could be a little bit wrong there. Yeah, you can play a bit. One, it's going to be really laggy, and the ping issue really comes into play there. Really, the only time we see it much is when we have, Florida versus Oklahoma. One's on the Central servers, one's on the East servers. And it's a little bit, but they're close enough that it doesn't make too much difference. But when we start looking at stuff like that, you would definitely see issues. We haven't run into them solely because, we're the Southeast. We're not really going to go too crazy there. But I definitely could see a couple things coming out of it. I know Red Bull puts on an event where it's their Valorant event, Campus Clutch, and they bring schools from all over.
How did you land that Red Bull sponsorship?
They're just really pro esports, honestly.
Okay.
And they have a good eye for it. The person we talked to was great. He was a classic Red Bull guy, super cool. He's actually moved on to better things now, and so we're with actually his ex-supervisor, I think now, has taken over the region of esports.
Okay.
And we at least had enough of a relevancy that they were like, this is good. We love sponsors that are pro esports and they understand it. And Red Bull is one of the groups that looked at us and said, y'all are doing something in esports that is good. We like it. It makes sense. We'll continue supporting you. We have Red Bull money for one, so to us, this is probably not, the world's biggest investment. They're fine giving you some money and throwing Red Bull at your event because they aren't about normal branding. They don't want their logo on stuff. They want people drinking Red Bull.
Yeah.
And so we love them for that. I mean, they are very good to work with. We've never given them like a sponsor deck, if you know what I mean, where it's like, oh, you'll get 3 Instagram posts. They're like, we'll just send you some Red Bull, have fun. And it's like, this is amazing.
That's cool.
And if anything, it makes us want to talk about it more. And so we're all the time, the casters have Red Bull. They're drinking it on stream. They're doing Red Bull tryings because Bepic had never had a Red Bull. And so he tried them on stream and was like, this is pretty good, actually. And I mean, it's a great experience working with brands like that. Another brand we worked with was MSI. They're a computer parts manufacturer, very much esports focused. That's the brands we like to see. It's another reason we haven't had a ton of sponsors. We had Opera GX Gaming web browser. We've worked with brands like that. And so our goal isn't just give us a couple $100, we'll put your logo on it. Our goal is find brands who will interact with the esports community and honestly really gain something from it. It was something I always loved about Wiersig Enterprises. We interact with people who needed our services and wanted to be part of our ecosystem, not just here you go, here you go. You know, same with this. And it's been my mindset all life, My leadership kind of strategy is more of like participative. I want to be part of the process, not just transactional. And so it's really important to me that is how our brand continues to exist, where it's an ecosystem of brands that are part of Southeastern esports, not just a brand that sponsored Southeastern esports. And so, we're looking at bringing on an apparel brand, same concept. It's an esports jersey brand. That would be cool for the schools because now they have a direct reason to support this esports jersey brand that, ironically enough, like half of our programs already use. And so it's brands like that and working with them that makes it happy. So really the Red Bull stuff is just, it kind of felt like a reward for us doing something good for esports and them being like, you're actually doing that. We'd love to help out.
Yeah, I love my interest peaked just hearing Red Bull is involved with what I know they do with extreme sports. And I think they built that, they sponsored that half pipe
they do
that Sean White built, the secret half pipe in the mountains of Colorado. And that's where he progressed the sport. And then later that secret got out, and then they started, just kind of building these half pipes for everybody. But, for all of us who are into extreme sports and action sports, I mean, Red Bull is a leader. So if that's a huge sponsor.
Yeah. I mean, and for it to be one of they're like our third sponsor, which was wild to us because, we were filling out official documents and stuff for all these other brands that said, we're not interested at the time. Red Bull was a Discord conversation with somebody that led into a email, into a Teams call. No documents have been said. He's like, bro, that sounds awesome. And
I love it.
Gaines was the guy's name. And I love that guy to death. He was the most Red Bull man I have ever met in my life.
Company man.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't, he just looked like someone who would be part of Red Bull.
Yeah.
And he was like, we can jump out of a plane. And I was like, where did that come from? He was like, it'd be cool. Let's drink Red Bull, jump out of a plane, esports. I was like, none of that correlates, but that sounds so much fun. Let's do it. We never did that. But it was just talking with him about it was a cool experience. I mean, and for me as at the time I was a sophomore in college, it's I'm working with Red Bull, and one of my friends was actually the Red Bull rep for UAH, and it was her boss's boss, something like that, and they just sent Red Bull down to her, and so she just showed up with a ton of Red Bull. They told me to give this to you. And now the UH Esports has a Red Bull fridge that they literally have permanent Red Bull in. It just never, if they run out slightly, they email them, they send them more. And it's such a cool experience working with a brand like that. And cool thing with them is they're the leaders in iRacing. So it's esports racing. So there's actually a movie coming out here soon called Gran Turismo. And it's about a kid who was doing esports racing on Gran Turismo. And they realized that these people are getting more track hours in than the actual professional racers. And it's the same tracks, the same cars. It feels the same. The only difference is the physical aspect. So they found a bunch of these guys, and they got them to train, and they figured out who was physically fit, and this one guy was it. And he ended up being one of the best Gran Turismo racers they had ever found. And it's because he literally just had thousands and thousands and thousands of track hours through e-racing. And so there's actually an entire esport around it now, and Red Bull hosts it, and it is so cool. There's people on Team BMW or Team Ferrari, whatever, and it's the legitimate company sponsoring these people to do e-racing, and it's exciting to see things like that. no one would have thought e-racing was going to be the flagship at esports, but it's really turning into something like that.
That's cool.
And of course, it's Red Bull doing it.
All right, I'm going to ask you. We're going to play the game. We're going to play a game called. I'm going to call it 6+1. I used to call it the quick 6, but I always like to ask at least 7 questions, so we'll call it 6+1.
Perfect.
These are just some random questions, and they don't have to be quick answers. All right, just to get to know Fred a little bit better. All right, so Bezos, Zuckerberg, Musk, or Bronson? Who's your or Branson? Who do you more?
I'd probably go with Musk out of that, just because I think it's funny sometimes. Does more interesting stuff for the most part. Zuckerberg's probably the least on Zuckerberg or Branson's probably the least on the list. I like Richard Branson some just because he did some Shark Tank stuff, but Bezos, he's funny though. Have you ever seen the picture where it's him with like the vest on and he's like looks really jacked and he has like the sunglasses on?
Yeah.
I love that photo so much. It's the funniest photo to me because it's like 1996 and it's like him and his little sweater and it's like I sell books, and then it was like 2023 I sell whatever I want. But yeah, probably Musk out of that one.
Okay. Yeah, I remember he was on like Amazon was like featured on 60 Minutes in like the late 90s.
Yeah, it's from there.
And he was just pushing around he had like an ice cream cart.
Yeah, he had books and stuff.
And he would just like go to his employees and say, "I'll give you ice cream, but you have to give me one good idea about Amazon." And yeah, all they were doing was selling books. But it was about like the culture that he had built, and then now it's like it's just amazing where they have gone.
It's wild. It's wild where all those people go. I mean, you just never think those things can turn into just this crazy concept that's just the biggest thing on earth now.
Give me a person if you were to get to spend 8 hours, a full day with anybody and pick their brain, who would you want to spend the day with?
That's a hard one. I would say maybe like Mark Cuban, somewhere in that range. I loved Shark Tank growing up. Mark Cuban was my favorite shark, so I feel like just asking him tons of random questions would just give you so much knowledge. I mean, someone like Mark Cuban, Warren Buffett, I mean, Bill Gates, someone who's basically from like the ground up was like, I'm going to build something, and they did it, and it worked. And sometimes I think, oh, Mark Cuban's was a fluke, but then the more I think about it, I'm like, maybe it wasn't. I mean, he knew exactly what he was doing. I mean, he made that streaming website and said, I'm selling it, cool, good deal. And then he did so much more with it. And so, I mean, really anybody in that range, anybody who's been able to grow like a business from in their garage, quite literally, to being one of the richest people on the planet, in the billions and stuff like that just blows my mind.
I used to love learning about Chambers at Cisco was the same way.
Yeah.
He out of his living room with his wife, and of course Bill Gates in the garage, Michael Dell in the garage.
They all started in that one spot. And
Zuckerberg in his dorm room.
Exactly.
And I was like, when I, knew I was going to interview you, and I was like, oh man, this is born out of a dorm room at UAH, right? It's exciting. I was like, of course it's going to succeed.
It's it's a dorm? Sure.
The only difference is you actually stayed in college and finished. You didn't drop out.
Oh, yeah. I was like, I'm getting that engineering title.
All right. If you were to like rob a bank and needed a getaway car, what's your getaway car?
I'm just going to go with my dream car. So I have a dream realistic and I have a dream unrealistic.
Okay.
McLaren, 720 something in there. That's the dream unrealistic, because even if I had so much money, there's no way I'm spending $1.2 million on a car. Like if I had $1 billion, I think I'd still be like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
That just feels wrong.
Okay.
I love the Porsche Taycan Turbo S's, the little EV that they made there. I love those, and I love the BMW i4. Those are any three of those. But if I was like a bank robber who was like coming out of, Oceans, whatever, the McLaren, 100%. Right.
Any other period of time in world's history that you would have liked to live in?
I think from the industrial engineering side of me, I think I would have loved like the Industrial Revolution, without some of all the bad stuff that was going on, but just the concept of like so much stuff changing at once. I think I would have been enamored just the whole time of, looking in the newspaper, and today we've made the assembly line. Now we're mass producing stuff, and it's like, whoa, That's insane. Like to see that unfold before your eyes and see those factories pop up. And like granted the time period probably was not the best to live in, but just seeing the actual innovation and stuff. And I'd say probably the same about, you know, the early 2000s, late 90s where a lot of the big tech boom started to happen.
Yeah.
One of those time periods, but probably, you know, the Industrial Revolution. I mean, I loved the industrial engineering side of my major where we got to talk about, you know, how the Toyota production system works and stuff like that. I mean, it's like they gaslit me. I'm never buying anything but a Toyota. I drive a BMW right now, but like I want a Toyota.
I interviewed the guy from Mazda Toyota Manufacturing. I mean, talk about two awesome companies.
Yeah,
coming together. I know I've never owned a Mazda, but when it comes to like how they make cars,
Toyotas,
and they're both Japanese.
Yeah,
I mean, they get together. I mean, there's nobody who makes a better car.
It's wild. I mean, when we learn about the TPS, like. One teacher, best teacher I've ever had. I love that class so much. It was one of the few classes that like I was excited to be in there. And we went into a mobile home manufacturing plant and we like took notes and we figured out their system and like analyzed it, tried to optimize it, and then we did the same with the TPS and like we implemented the TPS and it's like I came out there and I was like, I can't buy another vehicle. Like I have to buy a Toyota.
That's awesome. All right, next question. Any phobias? What are you scared of?
I used to be absolutely terrified of needles. I got over it mostly because of the military, and I had Accutane as a kid.
Okay.
So they had to do so much blood taking, but that was bad. Like, I had to get one of my teeth, like, drugged through the roof of my mouth, so they put me under, and I never knew how big the anesthesia needles were. And they put it on the little table in front of me, and I was, like, freaking out. I was, like, hyperventilating. The little machine's going beep, 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 beep. The nurse comes around, and she's like, what's wrong? I'm like, get that out of here. I can't do this. You know, I'm, like, 12, freaking out over there. They put me under. I'm like swinging my arm around. It took too many people to do that. It was kind of embarrassing, honestly. Apparently, I apologized on the way out when I was like unconscious. I don't believe that, but I'd say even now I have a little bit of a phobia of needles.
Okay.
You know, I have those other deep phobias where it's like losing everyone you love. But I feel like the needles one, there'll always be a little bit of that left in me. And truthfully, like they don't even hurt anymore. But I'm still like, oh, this is gonna be the most painful thing ever. And then they put it in. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know this is you're still a young guy. You've got many years ahead of you, but on your epitaph, like, or what do you want people to know you by? Right, once you pass on, and you know all the people are gathered, all your loved ones, and what is it that one thing that you hope they remember from Fred?
I kind of hope that like someone has a good speech, you know, just like something awesome where it's like he did all these things in his life, and then it ends, and it's like, but he always got what he wanted, and he always accomplished his dreams, and that's my goal. You know, I always have that dream of, you know, Wiersig Enterprises towers, you know, where the current courthouse sits, you know, right there in the middle of town, and a little mansion up on the mountain where I can see the progress I make through Huntsville. You know, growing up, I always assumed like I'd make some crazy cool company that would do like the next big thing in tech, and Huntsville would be the epicenter for it. Yeah. You know, I always imagined like a smart card that controlled everything. You know, you'd get in your elevator at your apartment, didn't know what floor you're on, it'd take you there. You know, the big IoT technology to change everything. And I'd want to sit in that, you know, balcony and just see all Huntsville where like different properties.
Where'd that come from? Is that sounds a lot like Back to the Future 2, where Biff, you know, they go into the future and Biff like enterprises everything, or is it Trump with The Apprentice? Early on, I mean, I know you said Mark Cuban. Where did that come from for you?
I'd almost say Tony Stark.
Tony Stark? Okay.
I'm a huge Marvel fan.
Sure.
Always been a big Marvel nerd. A friend of mine in college, she always called me Tony Stark. I don't know where that came from, but it kind of always stuck with me. You know, growing up, it was like, I'm going to be like that guy someday. That'd be sick. And I always liked I wanted to be a computer engineer originally. I ended up hating the major, which was kind of ironic. But
you actually got a little bit of the voice, of Downey's voice.
Oh, yeah?
A little bit of how it trails off. So
That's
maybe
cool.
she just picked up on your voice a little bit too.
Huh. Well, I always had those lofty aspirations to be like, you know, it'd be cool to just be super rich and then build all these things, build all this tech, but then just do something unique for yourself. And that's where I want to be, like, to have those dreams come true, where like I can like sit up there on that balcony and be like, yeah, I made a good impact here, and it's obvious. And that's what I want my, you know, the end of that sad funeral speech. I want everybody to be happy, kind of like he did what he came here to do. We're not sad that he's gone. He has a lasting legacy that not just the family at the funeral, but the random people that just I happen to make an impact on for whatever reason, you know, whether it's developing some kind of technology that helped people or just built up the city. You know, they that guy was good for here.
You know, I was thinking about that when I was running today. I was thinking about like that first question I asked you about like Bezos and Zuckerberg, and right, like on one hand, it's crazy that just a few people own so much wealth and have so much power and influence, right? Bill Gates, but I was thinking like if you asked somebody that question in like the 80s or the 90s, there might have been a political figure in there. The world was such that none of those names, there was nothing like that. I mean, maybe, Microsoft was kind of coming to be, but we were still not there yet.
It's kind of like a doubting thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what people would have said, just household names, right? They might have been more political figures or world leaders or an army general, but how had it changed? Where now it's like you really do think of
this group of people.
There's this group of people, that people like on a first name, last name basis. You know.
I would almost think, even on a first name, like people like Jeff and it's like Bezos or Elon Musk. And
right.
I would almost think if you gave me any time period to choose from, I'd choose like Rockefeller.
Yeah.
Someone in that realm. I think Rockefeller. I love New York. I love
the Vanderbilts.
Yeah. Anybody in those kind of like cool families, when you start to look at it, you're like, these people did so much. Like when you really look at Rockefeller, it's like he randomly had connections with everybody, but he still was able to accomplish all this stuff almost seemingly without that being a part of it. It's like he just had a little bit of everything going on and built it up as he went. And he truly had a dream and he took it and he went for it. And Rockefeller is really cool to me. I just always enjoy that little tour at the center there.
All right, last question. We all seemingly have this dream to be a rock star. Where, if you were not, I don't know if you sing well or not, but if you've ever had this thought, like, is there a venue that you have always felt like, man, that would be so cool to sing, right, and or to be the center of attention in this in a venue anywhere in the world? What would that venue be?
I'm gonna sound biased. I'll say the Orion.
Okay.
I don't know if that'd really be my top pick, but I think the Orion's just so cool. Just the actual look of it, what it is. It really is like I went and saw Bert Kreischer a while back, and he said the same thing. He said, I love Bert Kreischer, but he was like, this is like a once-in-a-lifetime venue. Like, you guys need to appreciate this. He told the whole crowd. We just sang the national anthem at like 11:30 at night. It was kind of an interesting experience there at the end. But then he goes, you guys need to appreciate this venue. I've been all over. I've been to all these places. You need to just take advantage of this. And
that's cool.
I think that was a really cool moment for me because I was like, Bert Kreischer's ATO alumni. I've loved his comedy this whole time. It was just really fun. And to hear him say that, I was like, he's right. I mean, and it's just true. I mean, we have something that's just unheard of in, that small town in the South, even though we're really not anymore. And
well, I like how you guys do, you play when you're doing an SEL and you got all these things going on, ultimately, though, that championship match is going to come on to the stage.
Exactly.
Right? And I would imagine that's an easy near-term goal for you, is to bring Esports finale, a championship match, to the Orion stage and people are watching.
Ironically enough, the venue we're looking at right now for the grand finals is not the Orion solely because it's outside, but is the Mars Music Hall.
Perfect, yeah.
And that'd be so cool to me because that's a very hometown moment for me where I did something, like, sure, it's been cool to do it at UAH. That to me, it's at my college. I could kind of pull that off by talking to people. I know people, whatever. Mars Music Hall, that's when I can, go to my parents and be like, hey, my event's in the VBC. That's super cool to me, and maybe from there, we've talked about the Orion. It'd have to be the perfect conditions, probably something high school level.
Yeah.
It would just be insane. I mean, past Orion, I'd say maybe a couple of the theaters in New York, some of the older ones where it's just, I love that kind of, old vibe where it's, this has been here. This has been through a lot. This has had countless famous people in it. But I think Orion's going to be there in, 20, 30, 50, 40 years where there's people who have gone on and passed who have just become legends and had played there. I think it'll be just like that.
Yeah. Can you believe we've been talking over 2 hours?
Oh,
Does it feel like it?
I always like to say whenever I get on calls for esports, I go, if I could end every day talking about esports or talking about Huntsville, I'm a happy man. I talk a lot. So yeah, I mean,
did you apply anywhere other than UAH?
I applied to MIT and UAH.
Okay.
Just to see if I get into MIT.
Did you have any sort of, did you have any interest in going to main campus in Tuscaloosa?
Definitely not UA. I thought about Auburn.
Did you?
Solely because at the time I was looking at computer engineering so hard and they had a good computer engineering program. But to me, I loved Huntsville no matter what.
Yeah.
I was going to live on campus either way. I was very blessed. My parents were like, we think you'll have a better college experience if you just go out there and live. And I did. I mean, I made the most of it. Like I did all the student council stuff. I did fraternity. It was great. I mean, I don't regret it at a single moment. I mean, I met my girlfriend there. You know, it's been great. I mean, UH is. I would not have as much as I have now if it wasn't for UH, especially like the job market here. I think I was a little more realistic than a lot of the other people my age who are like, oh, there's nothing fun in Huntsville. I'm going to go to UAAT. And it's like, what are you going to do there? Go to the bar? Okay. Yeah. What then?
What is fun? Yeah.
Yeah. I'll stay there after
There's nothing
college.
to do. Oh, and then you just stop. What is it you want to do?
Yeah, exactly.
And they never can come up with something. It's like there's usually when you say that, all you're doing is talking about bars and restaurants.
Yeah, and it's like
that's all you do in the city.
It doesn't make sense to me. And they're like, well, I'll stay there after college. I'm like, okay, where are you going to work?
Yeah.
Well, I'll get an engineering job. Where? What are you talking about? But no, I mean, I considered Auburn for a bit, but I definitely liked this kind of smaller vibe of UAH. I liked the more close-knit community. And honestly, like, I just loved Huntsville. And to me, it just made sense.
I think you're the imperfect embodiment of why I call this the Our Town podcast, because, and I don't know if you've ever heard me talk about this, but like, you know, you can have tremendous pride coming from Huntsville High, right?
Yeah. That's where I went to high school.
Right. And you know, those Bob Jones versus James Clemens, right? Or whether, as a Grissom, who's your big rival in Huntsville?
I'd say Grissom is kind of our big one. Sparkman a little bit, but Grissom's kind of our big rival.
So the purpose of Our Town is you figuratively draw these boundaries around things in which you are very competitive and very defensive. You know, it could be, let's say, the Wiersigs against the Andersons. The Andersons, let's say, are your best friends until it's time to play kickball.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's on. And you know, and you hate them. And if you lose, you're pissed. You don't even want to talk to them anymore, even though you're your friends. And then you have, like, I think what I get out of you is, you know, this tremendous pride living in Huntsville, the UA system. Oh, yeah, Tuscaloosa, of course, is the big campus. I went to George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia, which doesn't have a football team. It's very similar to UAH. It's huge. It's actually, I think, the highest enrollment of any public school in Virginia. Wow. It's got like 35,000 people.
They're actually on our SEL roster.
They are? Because they have the a lot of it's, you know, it started as a community college, let's say a long time ago, but you have enough people who it's like here where they work and then they go back to school. So I was kind of an adult student, and so then therefore, you don't have yes, they have dorms and all that, but you don't have the Division I football team, which is a real differentiator amongst a lot of our colleges and universities, right? So it's probably like a UAH in a way. UAH has got a high enrollment, I believe, right?
Fairly high. It's growing like crazy every year. It's
so
insane.
I think for you, it's like this, you know what? I want to make not only UAH like a premier institution that people want to come to, that kids in Alabama want to come to over and above other ones, but also just like continue to help put something on the map, right?
Exactly.
Because you have that pride. And that's what Our Town's all about.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know, man. I really got into like doing the research on this and just got really excited. And the more I've thought about all, like we talked about at the very beginning, all of the offshoots of esports.
It's weird how far out it goes.
Because it's people want to compete. They want to be a part of a team. You want to be part of an organization. If you're a business-minded person, you just want to build something. You want something to grow. You want, you want investment and see what's possible, you know, and you're right on the cusp of all of that.
And it's been insane. I mean, our growth has been insane. We couldn't have asked for like a better community, better area to start in. And honestly, it's so weird, the coincidences that keep happening. So when you think about the map, I kind of explained earlier how that box is. Guess what's right in the middle of that map? Huntsville.
Yeah.
And so it's weird.
Yeah.
And every day I'm like, Huntsville's the place. And then there's just another random reason, you know, before I even said that. Then a couple months later, we got, the first in the rankings for best places to live. And I was like, there's another reason. Oh, we're the first to do this amphitheater. Another reason. We just kept being the first. And it's like, let's be the first in esports. And so, I mean,
that's so cool.
It's that pride, like you said. And at the same time, sometimes it's like people are prideful for no reason, but then this pride is countless reasons. And it just doesn't stop. And so, like, sometimes I even try to be like, calm down a little bit. You're being too prideful. And then something else happens. And I'm like,
there you go.
All right, I'm going to keep doing it.
I'm going to be, I've got the green light to interview Mayor Battle.
That'd be cool.
And I'm glad that I'm interviewing him. I've told some people I'm glad I'm interviewing him now. You're episode 77.
Wow.
And I'm glad that I'm interviewing him and whatever ends up being somewhere in the 80s versus like last year, because now I just know more.
You've just met so many interesting people. Like going through your list, it's insane.
Yeah,
The
and
roster.
it's like now, like I would say to you, I know you ran track with the CC triplets, right? But it's like, hey, Joey CC and Lewis Breland are probably really good contacts that you have access to when it comes to.
It was like my mom went to high school with him.
Did it? Yeah,
yeah, it's wild.
Right, and I'll mention Demare Battle. So, what do you know about those who are asking for like an arena for esports and whatever multi-use? But anyway, it'll just be easier to talk to him now, knowing all of the other capital improvement projects they've done or what's on the horizon. What his thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, he's a man with a plan.
Yeah,
I mean, he's been here so long. Can't imagine what's in that head sometimes.
I love what Joey said. We were talking at the end. He was basically talking about how in Huntsville they're very open. We're very open to new people coming in, new ideas. He's like, Tommy Battle's from Birmingham, and now he's the mayor. And Paul Finley's from Kentucky. He's the mayor. He's like, if you're not born under the right magnolia bush in Mobile, you're not running for mayor.
You're not getting anywhere.
Because if your grandfather wasn't on the Mardi Gras committee, you ain't doing nothing.
Yeah.
I was like, he's like, but Huntsville's different.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. I meet people. It's weird at UH. There's a ridiculous number of people from Chicago.
Oh, really?
I have no idea why. Apparently, like we don't see it all the time here, but UH is very sought after in other places. And to me, I mean, when they tell me why, it's like, well, that makes sense. My roommate in my freshman year, he came here all the way from I want to say it was Wisconsin. He came from Wisconsin. I was like, how'd you get here from Wisconsin? He goes, well, I like rockets. I'm an aerospace major, and you guys put man on the moon. And I'm like,
there you go.
Fair enough, I
Rocket
guess.
City.
Yeah. And I'm like, the more you think about it, it's like you Google where to put man on the moon. It's like Huntsville or somewhere in Florida, and it's who did it? Who's Warner Von Braun? And it's like Huntsville. And the more I thought about it, I was like, that's insane. But I just kept meeting people like, oh, I'm from Chicago. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm from, California. And it's like, wow, like for only roughly 10,000 students my freshman year, it's an insane amount of people.
I don't have enough behind this, but I understand there's a pretty good esports over in Mississippi, or at least at one of the schools there.
Yeah, Ole Miss has a pretty good program.
Ole Miss does? Okay.
Really, I'll be honest, most of the state schools nowadays, the UATs, the Ole Misses, the Oklahoma, the UTKs, the Florida Gators, they're big enough that the students have finally rallied enough, especially over COVID.
Yeah.
That was the thing. Esports thrived in COVID. Sadly, no LAN events, but it did thrive enough to where there was enough growth that coming out of COVID, people were like, we want LANs. We want to experience something that we haven't gotten to experience, because a lot of those students, it was their junior year and they'd been online the whole time, and so we gave them that LAN event. And honestly, it was kind of Frankenstein together. It was in a side room at ChargerCon, but everybody was just like, we're happy to be here and playing in person, and it's cool to see that, like, all those schools come together, drive 6, 8, I think someone had a 10-hour drive or something, get a hotel room for the night, 2 nights, and just play. And so it's crazy to see.
You got any final thoughts, man?
No, this has been awesome. I love doing, like I said, if I get in my days talking about esports any day, I'm happy.
Well, I say this to every guest. I'm going to have you on again at some point.
Well, do. Hopefully we have an arena.
And actually, I have an idea I'm going to talk to you about after I hit stop. I don't want to reveal it online. I'm spitballing something in my mind. But, you have any shout-outs you want to give to anybody?
Everybody who's got me here. I mean, I'm definitely, everybody always jokes that Fred knows everybody, or if you need someone, my own mom will text me and be like, hey, I need a connection for blank. And I'm like, oh, okay, talk to so-and-so. And I talk a lot. I get into a lot of really weird situations where I talk to people, or 3, I do like what I do with you, and I just reach out to people. I'm like, hey, love to chat.
Yeah.
And every single one of those people that I've had those weird conversations with, whether it be some of the city councilmen or some of the people on the school board who gave me ideas for getting high schools involved, everybody, I mean, I couldn't be here without them. I mean, like I said, esports was never my thing. Like my buddy Jacob, he was like, here's what we do to make esports clubs happy. He was like, I was a player. I know what I didn't like about everybody else. Let's fix this. I know you'll be able to if I tell you what needs to be fixed. And we did it. I mean, it's people like that who just kind of drive what I'm able to do in life.
Cool. Well, hey, man, I appreciate you coming
Of course.
and all the best. Keep me posted.
Will do.
All right. Take care.